The light drizzle of early November pattered softly on the glass roof of Seattle Children's Hospital, each drop falling quietly as if blending into the sighs of the mothers waiting in the emergency room. The dim yellow light stretching down the long hallway cast elongated shadows on the stained walls, lonely and tired. Monica Turner stood there in silence, her hands clenched tightly around the pockets of her worn-out coat, her knuckles pale from the pressure. Her naturally curly hair was a tangled mess after nearly 20 hours without sleep, and her navy blue nurse's uniform was still the same one she'd worn through yesterday's long shift. But what drew people's attention wasn't the disheveled appearance, it was her eyes. Eyes that carried a bone-deep despair, as if the world were slipping away minute by minute and nothing could hold it back. Lyla, her daughter, was lying in the ICU, her tiny heart ready to stop beating at any moment. The doctors had said there was nothing more they could do, only ease the pain and make her passing peaceful. But how could Monica feel peace when the child she'd held in her arms for the past 6 years, the only person she had left in this world, looked at her with pleading eyes? "Mommy, I just want someone to call me a princess, just once." Lyla had never known what it meant to have a father. Her biological father had disappeared like smoke just 2 days after she was born, leaving behind a cold note on the kitchen counter and a tiny heart that never got the chance to feel the warmth of someone called Dad. Since then, Monica had been mother and father, the flickering flame of hope amid nonstop hospital shifts and 3 jobs at once just to keep the two of them alive. And now, when every doctor had shaken their head, when even medicine had lost its power, Lila's final wish wasn't something money or pills could buy a father. And that's when Monica saw him. The man standing by the front desk waiting for the hospital's shuttle service was the embodiment of a world she had never touched. He wore a charcoal gray overcoat, a phone in his left hand, his right adjusting a sleek luxury watch. No one needed to tell her. Monica knew instantly this was Elliot Grant, the CEO of Tech, the leading biomedical company that had just entered a strategic partnership with the hospital. His face had been on the cover of Forbes at global conferences and in the distant dreams of countless women except Monica. But she had nothing left to lose. No thinking, no hesitation, no time for her heart to speak. Monica walked swiftly toward him, her legs trembling, barely holding her, up, her breath short and sharp, like it might be her last. When she stopped, Elliot had just looked up. His gray-blue eyes met her deep brown ones, and they stood still for one heavy, fleeting second. "Excuse me," Monica spoke, her voice hoarse and barely human. "I know this sounds insane, completely unreasonable, but would you?" She swallowed, inhaled. Her eyes never left Elliot's, as if knowing that if she didn't say it now, she would never get the chance again. "Would you be my daughter's father? Just for one day?" Elliot didn't react right away. He didn't look surprised. He didn't walk away like she had imagined he would. He was just silent, a silence without judgment, without threat, only his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to grasp whether what he'd just heard was real. "She's dying," Monica whispered, her voice cracking. "And her last wish is to be held by a father, to be called a princess, even if it's just once." Her hands gripped the front of Elliot's coat, clinging to the last flicker of hope in a world that was falling apart. She knew this was madness. A black woman, exhausted, standing in a hospital hallway, begging a stranger, a billionaire, to play the role of a father. No one in their right mind would do that. But Monica wasn't in her right mind anymore. She was just a mother. In that moment, Elliot still didn't say a word, but his eyes had changed. Something in his expression softened, like a tightly shut door cracking open ever so slightly. No one knew that Monica's words had awakened something long buried inside him, a memory of a young Elliot lying alone in a hospital bed, never once visited by anyone. And perhaps from the moment Monica called her daughter Princess, Elliot was no longer an outsider. Because sometimes to create a miracle, you don't need magic. You just need someone brave enough to love someone who was never theirs to begin with. If you've ever believed that love, no matter the bloodline, can be strong enough to change destiny, then stay with us on this miraculous journey. Hit like to send strength to Monica. Comment if you've ever cried for someone you love, and follow the channel so you don't miss the next part, where one single day might become the beginning of a whole new life. The special care unit on the 9th floor carried a faint but haunting scent of antiseptic, as if the coldness of truth had seeped into every crack of the walls, the bedding, and even the restless sleep that never brought peace. On the pristine white bed behind a transparent curtain, little Lyla lay still, like a fragile doll, a thin IV tube connected to the back of her hand, the ventilator humming steadily, its flickering numbers counting down what little hope remained. Monica sat beside her, gently brushing aside a tangle of soft curls from her daughter's forehead. Her hand appeared steady, just like always, but only she knew how numb each finger felt from fear. Lyla opened her eyes slowly, not exactly tired, but more like someone used to enduring. Her gaze resembled Monica's eerily deep brown and filled with quiet waves of emotion. But today the light was gone from those eyes, replaced by a fracture. "Mama," Lyla whispered, her voice as soft as the wind. "I dreamed. I was sinking." "No, no, baby," Monica leaned down, clutching her tiny hand tightly. "You're still here with me, and I'm here with you. We're not going anywhere, Lyla. Not ever." "But I dreamed my heart broke apart into tiny little pieces, like shattered glass." "You know, Mama, it didn't hurt the usual way. It was cold, really cold." Monica fell silent. A single tear slipped down and vanished onto her daughter's hand. "The doctors say you're a little warrior," she whispered. "They've never seen anyone as strong as you." Lyla let out a faint smile, her dry lips barely curling upward. "Mama, the kids in the hospital, they all have someone who visits. Some have grandparents, some have uncles and aunts. Yesterday I saw Ethan's dad carry him around the hallway. He laughed. A lot." She paused, her eyes drifting toward the window where Seattle lay beneath the cold drizzle. "I've never known who my dad is," Mama Lyla whispered. "I don't blame you. I just wonder, does he know I love strawberries, that I hate needles? Has he ever thought about me? Or am I just something he wanted to forget?" Monica felt her whole body tremble. Under the hospital's white lights, her face turned unnaturally pale. For 6 years, she had done everything to protect her daughter. She was her nurturer, her shelter, her only source of light in the world. But some voids couldn't be filled by love alone. Maybe, Lyla continued, maybe he's a busy man, or a scared one, or maybe someone who didn't want me to exist. Lyla Monica gripped her daughter's hand tightly, her eyes red and swollen. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and anyone who didn't want you is the most unfortunate person in the world." Lyla smiled, a small smile that shattered Monica's heart. "Mama," the girl whispered, if I don't make it, don't be sad. I'm not afraid of dying." "Don't say that. Never say that." "I'm only afraid of one thing." Lyla turned to look at her mother, her eyes bright and heartbreakingly clear. "I'm afraid of dying without ever knowing what it feels like to be loved by a father. Never being called someone's baby girl, never being carried on someone's shoulders, or bought ice cream, or called daddy's princess." Monica pulled her into a tight embrace, her head collapsing onto Lyla's shoulder, choking on her own sobs. She didn't know what else to do. She had fought too long, too hard. She had done everything: 3 jobs, no days off, no proper sleep. All so her daughter wouldn't feel deprived. But she had forgotten one thing: children don't suffer from what the eye can see. They suffer from what the heart doesn't have. Monica's heart ached so deeply she could barely breathe. But this pain didn't come from her body. It came from that crushing feeling of helplessness, like she was holding something precious that was slowly slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. A small alarm sounded. The heart monitor blinked. Lyla closed her eyes again, worn out from the effort of staying awake. Monica gently stroked her hair and placed a kiss on her forehead. She stood up and walked out of the room on trembling legs. She had to do something. She couldn't let her child leave this world with a heart that had never known complete love. If she couldn't save her daughter's body, then, at the very least, she had to save that final dream. She stepped into the hallway, heart-pounding eyes scanning urgently. And then, she saw him, Elliot Grant. There was no time for hesitation, no space left for pride or shame, because a mother's love does not kneel before dignity. She clenched her fists and took a deep breath. This was all she had left, and if there was even the slightest chance, she would take it. Elliot Grant was used to everything in his life running on time, on schedule, in perfect order. At 6 a.m., his coffee had to be espresso brewed from hand-roasted Ethiopian beans. At 7:15, he would run exactly 6.2 kilometers around Lake Union, no more, no less. And from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., his calendar was stacked with meetings. Each minute accounted for each second, with a reason to exist. He didn't believe in surprises. He didn't believe in emotions. And he certainly didn't believe in anything called destiny. Until that woman came rushing toward him like a gust of damp air after rain, her eyes red, her hands trembling, as they gripped his sleeve, and she uttered words he would never forget. "Would you be my daughter's father? Just for one day?" For a moment, Elliot thought he had misheard. Her voice was so shaky it almost dissolved into the air, but her eyes, they burned like the last flame in a darkened room, and those eyes made it impossible for him to turn away. This woman, though on the verge of collapse, was not weak. On the contrary, she was terrifyingly strong. Beneath the exhaustion and the wrinkled nurse's uniform was a spirit forged of steel, willing to sacrifice everything for a child. Elliot had never met anyone like her. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," he began, his voice slightly hoarse. He'd skipped lunch after a longer than expected meeting. "Are you—" "She's dying," she cut in without a second's hesitation. "And the last thing she wants is to be held by a father and called a princess. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking you to pretend. Just one afternoon, one meal, one hug, one word." Elliot wasn't someone easily swayed by others' emotions. Since he was 15, he had learned how to distinguish genuine words from skillful performances. In biotech, trust was a luxury, and Elliot had lived long enough to know that the world operated on logic, not feeling. But for some reason with this woman, he couldn't walk away like he normally would. He felt something blocking him from inside, a weight he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was obsession. Maybe it was an old memory resurfacing. Or worse, something he had locked away long ago, empathy. "What's your name?" he asked. "Monica. Monica Turner." "Your daughter's name?" "Lyla, 6 years old, born with a heart defect. She's had 3 surgeries. Now, there's no more hope." Elliot nodded slightly. The facts were brief, clear. He could process them easily, like reading a medical report. But what unsettled him wasn't the data. It was Monica's eyes, not pleading, but the eyes of someone ready to endure humiliation, just to give her child one final moment. "Why me?" Elliot asked slowly. Monica took a deep breath, as if she had already prepared for this question. "Because your eyes look like my father's when he was young. Because you're as tall as Lyla always imagined. Because she likes people with light hair and soft smiles. And because when I look at you, I see something her real father never had a heart strong enough to stay." He looked at her, silent, for a long, long time. No one said anything else. The rain tapping on the window seemed to echo with every heartbeat, every quiet pulse of a decision no one had seen coming. Then Elliot raised his hand, adjusted the button on his shirt collar, and took a slow breath. He didn't say yes. He didn't say, "I'll try." He simply asked, "Does she like strawberry ice cream?" Monica froze. Her eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Then she nodded slowly as tears spilled over, too fast to hold back. "She loves it." Elliot gave a slight nod, like confirming a software installation. "Then we shouldn't keep a princess waiting too long." He pulled out his phone and typed a short message to his assistant: "Cancel all afternoon appointments. Do not disturb unless someone dies. Or I do." Putting the phone away, he turned to Monica. "Take me to meet Lyla, please." Monica turned and led him toward the elevator. They didn't speak the entire walk. But in that silence, something strange was shifting. A woman carrying the wound of a lifetime walked beside a man who had shut down his emotions for years. They were total strangers, no shared ideals, no common world. And yet in that moment, through the sterile white hallway, their footsteps echoed together like the rhythm of something unnamed, something fragile and new, just beginning to breathe. Perhaps when all doors have closed, destiny quietly opens a hidden passage through a stranger. A stranger, standing in the middle of fate. Room 908 was as quiet as ever, with only the steady beeping of the heart monitor, breaking the silence, a slow, gentle rhythm, like the breath of an angel asleep. The glow of the sunset slipped through pearl-colored curtains, bathing the room in a pale milk-like gold, beautiful but achingly sad. Monica pushed open the door. "Lyla, there's someone here who wants to meet you." Elliot stood behind her, stepping in slowly, as if afraid that even his breath might shatter the fragile atmosphere. On the bed, little Lyla lay, curled on her side, her head resting on her tiny arm. Her soft, curly hair spread over the pillow, and her skin was so thin that the blue veins beneath it were visible under the light. But when she opened her eyes, there was something in them, a kind of magic Elliot couldn't explain. Lyla looked at him, wide, round eyes filled with surprise and hesitation. Elliot froze. He had met thousands of people at tech conferences, investment strategy briefings, charity auctions where everyone smiled just the right way. But no one had ever looked at him like that, as if he were something important, as if he were a miracle. Lyla tilted her head slightly, her lips moving. Who are you, sir? Her voice was raspy but warm, like the sound of leaves brushing against a fall window. Elliot hesitated. The question flickered in his mind. What should I say? Should I call myself her dad? Should I pretend? Or should I just be honest? Then he sat down slowly and gently, making sure the cushion didn't creak. He looked at Lyla and smiled a smile his assistant once joked was rare, only appears when stock prices surge unexpectedly. I'm Elliot, but if you want, today you can call me Dad. The little girl's eyes widened. A moment of silence passed. Then her lips curved into a smile. So, I get to be your princess today. Elliot's heart clenched. Not because of the words, but because of how she said them. So innocently it hurt, as if this were a dream too expensive for a child to even reach for. Not just today, he replied, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. From now until you fall asleep, I'll be right here. Princess Lyla. Lyla smiled a delicate smile like the last ray of light before nightfall. Monica turned away, pressing her hand to her chest, tears falling quietly. Not from pain, but because for the first time in months, she saw her daughter truly smile. Elliot held out his hand. Lyla hesitated for a second, then placed her tiny palm in his. That feeling startled Elliot. Her hand was so small it felt like it could vanish. But that gentle grip held the weight of an entire world. You like strawberry ice cream, don't you? He asked. Yes, but the doctor says I can't have too much. She pouted, a mischievous tone in her voice. But today's special, right, Daddy? Elliot laughed. He never imagined he would laugh like that in a place like this. But Lyla made him forget every rule, every boundary, until all that was left was something pure connection. He pulled a small container of ice cream from his coat pocket. I bought the lowest sugar one in the city, he said, half joking. You're so thoughtful, Lyla grinned. Just like a real dad. In the glow of the sunset pouring through the window, Elliot sat there, the man who once didn't believe in feelings, who built walls of steel around his heart, now feeding spoonfuls of ice cream to a little girl preparing to leave this world. And in each quiet moment, something inside him began to shift. No music played, no spotlight lit the room. But in room 908, a door was quietly opening, not a window, not the hospital door, but the door to a heart long sealed shut. And the one who opened it wasn't an angel from above, just a 6-year-old girl with a dream of being called a princess and a deep belief that love is real. When Elliot left the hospital around 8 p.m., the sky over Seattle had faded into a soft ash-gray hue. He stood beneath the awning, watching the fine drizzle begin to fall onto the cold, wet pavement. For the first time in years, he didn't want to go home. Not because that place was cold. His penthouse on the 63rd floor overlooking Elliott Bay was a masterpiece of tranquility. But ever since that afternoon with Lyla, it no longer felt peaceful enough to quiet the echoes in his chest. Lyla had drifted to sleep, clutching the stuffed bear Monica said was her best friend during all her surgeries. Elliot had watched the small child close her eyes, her tiny hands still loosely gripping the hem of his shirt, as if afraid that when she opened them again, Daddy would vanish like a fleeting dream. And Monica remained silent. Throughout the entire afternoon, she had barely spoken. She simply stood nearby watching. Her dark eyes were gentle but always veiled with a thin mist, as though a door inside her had long been shut, unreachable by anyone, even herself. When Elliot returned to the hallway to grab his coat, Monica was already there. Her slender frame leaned against the railing, clutching a lukewarm coffee from the vending machine. She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the hazy line where the sky met the city. You don't have to come back, she said. No preamble, no introduction. Elliot didn't respond right away. He stood beside her, also not looking, as if both had silently agreed tonight they wouldn't face each other directly. But the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two strangers sitting side by side on a late-night train. No names, no destination, only the shared rhythm of breathing in the dark. I will come back, he said, if you'll let me. Monica gripped the coffee cup tighter. The soft plastic crackled under the pressure of her fingers. I don't think you should get involved. Why not? Because it's not fair to you, to her. A gust of wind passed by. Elliot tilted his head, looking at her for the first time during their conversation. Do you think she needs fairness or hope? Monica didn't answer, but after a few seconds, she exhaled slowly. I used to think, if I were strong enough, firm enough, I wouldn't need anyone else. I was wrong. Her voice softened, fading like wind between window panes. Lyla isn't the result of love. She's the result of a mistake. Elliot remained quiet. Monica continued as though that inner door had finally cracked open just a little. I once loved a man, or at least I thought I did. When I found out I was pregnant, he disappeared. No words, no messages, no responsibility, not even a backward glance. She turned to face Elliot for the first time. She didn't cry, but her eyes, deep and proud, hit him like a cold shock. I used to be so angry. Angry about being abandoned. Angry about raising a child alone. But then, all that anger disappeared the moment I first saw her. She clenched her hand. Lyla is the only beautiful thing that mistake ever gave me. And from that second on, I swore I wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Not even me. A long silence followed. Elliot didn't interrupt. Inside him, a strange feeling settled. Not pity, not sympathy. It was respect. Respect for a woman who had carried pain, loneliness, and collapse, yet still managed to rise to be a mother, to be the guide for a fragile little life. Then, why me? He asked softly. Because Lyla thinks I look like someone from a fairy tale. Monica gave a small laugh, a bitter smile, like honey stirred with sea salt. No, because when I saw you, I saw someone just as lonely as me. Elliot flinched slightly. Not because it was untrue, but because it was painfully accurate. I don't need anyone's pity, he said quietly. And I'm not looking for pity, she shot back, eyes steady. All I want is for my daughter in her final moments to know what unconditional love feels like. Even if just for a day. Even if it's just one hug. This time Elliot looked at her for a long time. Not like a CEO listening to a presentation, not like an investor weighing risks, but like a human being truly facing another soul for the first time. Do you think, he said slowly, some things don't have to end in just one day? Monica went still. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to, because her eyes said it all. She was afraid. Afraid to hope. Afraid that if she opened her heart again, she'd be left behind once more. And Elliot understood. There is no wound more terrifying than one that's been forgotten. No silence colder than the kind that follows misplaced trust. But in that moment in the quiet hospital hallway, where yellow light cast two long shadows on the cold tile floor, something changed. A man began to question the meaning of perfect scheduling, and a woman for the first time in years allowed herself to speak the truth she had never told. Early the next morning, Seattle was soaked in misty rain, the air thinned by droplets brushing against the third-floor windows of Mercer Grace Children's Hospital. But inside room 908, a different world was quietly forming, warm, small, but powerful enough to melt even the coldest ice lodged deep in the human heart. Elliot returned to the hospital just as the clock struck 7 a.m. No reminder from his assistant, no calendar alert. Not because of any formal promise, just because when he woke up, he knew he needed to be there. He had never woken up for anyone before. His company, his partners, the markets, they all revolved around him, not the other way around. But today he chose to follow the rhythm of something far more fragile. And strangely, he found comfort in it. Daddy's here. Lyla squealed when she saw him walk in, though her voice, frail, had borrowed every ounce of strength she'd saved up through the night. Monica, folding her daughter's clothes into a small fabric bag, turned and gave him a soft nod. No grand gesture, but Elliot understood. It was silent acceptance. "Hello, princess," he said, sitting at the edge of the bed, his coat still dotted with raindrops he hadn't brushed off. "What shall we do today?" "I want to draw." Lyla held up a stack of blank paper and some old colored pencils Monica had brought from home. Elliot took them, slightly awkward. How long had it been since he last held a colored pencil? Probably not since he was 8, when his father had yelled at him for wasting time on silly drawings that ruined his math scores. But Lyla didn't judge. She simply drew flowers, sun's castles, and lots of hearts. Elliot drew too. His hand was clumsy, his lines uneven. But every time Lyla laughed, his scribbles turned into masterpieces. "This is me. This is Mommy. And this is Daddy," she said, pointing at 3 simple stick figures, each with big round eyes and smiles that stretched from ear to ear. "Is Daddy bald like this?" Elliot asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because Daddy's a CEO and doesn't have time to comb his hair." Lyla giggled, sharp as ever. Monica laughed for the first time in days. Elliot pretended to frown. "Then tomorrow, Daddy better come early to brush his hair before drawing time." Lyla took a tired breath, but her eyes still sparkled with joy. Only Monica noticed after every laugh her daughter's breathing quickened. Each smile seemed to cost a weakened heartbeat, but she didn't interrupt. She didn't stop the moment. Because today her daughter was truly living, not just surviving. By midday, Monica needed to step out briefly to handle insurance paperwork. She turned to Elliot a little hesitant. Could you stay with her for a bit? Elliot just nodded. No questions, no hesitation. The door closed behind Monica, and in that moment Elliot found himself alone with a delicate little life, not as a visitor, but as something more. As a real father. Lila's eyes were closed, her breath shallow. Elliot picked up a cloth and wiped the sweat from her forehead, then gently smoothed her hair. Daddy, Lyla whispered, eyes still shut. Did you know Mommy cried alone in the hospital hallway once? He froze. There was one time I had a really high fever and Mommy thought I wouldn't make it. She didn't cry in front of me, but I heard her sobbing into the payphone. Her voice grew softer. Back then, I wished someone would come and hug her. Someone who'd make her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. Elliot sat motionless, his throat tightened. I won't let your mommy be alone, he said, barely audible. Lyla smiled faintly still with her eyes closed. Then, today is the day you officially become my real daddy, right? He didn't answer with words. Elliot leaned down and held her close. For the first time in his life, he knew how to embrace someone not through logic, not by strategy, but simply to fill the void in a child's chest and in his own heart. No one witnessed that moment. No cameras, no spotlight. Just a man who once didn't believe in feelings, now quietly shedding tears as a small child placed her full trust in the safety of his arms. That day, no one declared Elliot a father. There was no new birth certificate, no adoption papers, only a fragile little girl breathing with effort, whispering the one word Elliot would carry with him for the rest of his life. Daddy. On the third day Elliot came to the hospital, Monica no longer called him Mr. Hayes. She simply opened the door and tilted her head slightly. Lila's waiting. No pleasantries, no formalities. Between them, silence had long since replaced the need for words. Lyla was weaker than the day before. The soft pink flush in her cheeks had vanished, replaced by a pale, faded tone, like worn paper once filled with color. Pediatric heart surgeon Dr. Kershaw sat across from Monica and Elliot, opening a thin stack of folders on the table. There is one option, he said in the neutral tone of someone long accustomed to delivering heavy news. An experimental method from Japan, induced pluripotent stem cell therapy combined with myocardial tissue regeneration. But, Monica nodded slightly, but the success rate is very low. Dr. Kershaw looked up. His eyes, tired from too many surgeries beyond the limits, narrowed a bit. And the cost is very high. A number was spoken, 6 digits, and 2 additional words. Not covered. Elliot said nothing. Monica remained silent. Outside the window, a dove fluttered past its wings, casting a fleeting shadow across the rain-slicked glass. We don't require anything, the doctor said gently. But if Ms. Monica chooses to proceed, the hospital can coordinate with the Umeda Medical Center in Tokyo. They'll need a decision within 24 hours. The graft must align with Lila's biological cycle. If delayed, the opportunity will be lost. Dr. Kershaw left, leaving the two alone with a single thin sheet printed in a mix of English and Japanese medical terms, dancing before Monica's eyes, yet only one word stood out clearly: hope. She sat still, saying nothing. Elliot stood nearby, his hands in his pockets. The expensive leather shoes he wore now seemed out of place in the sterile white corridor of the hospital. How much, he asked at last. Monica turned to him. She looked at him for a long time. What, you don't have to. It's not because I have to, Elliot cut in. It's because Lyla needs it. She didn't speak, but in her eyes was a storm, a mix of gratitude and fear. This isn't just money, Monica said softly. It's a life, a responsibility, a future. If something goes wrong, I can't let you carry it like some failed investment. Elliot stepped closer. He sat down, lowering himself so his eyes met hers, not above, not below. Monica, he said, whispering her name for the first time. You can reject me out of pride, out of belief, or out of your past. But don't reject a chance, no matter how small, for your daughter to live. Monica's hand tightened. Her knuckles turned white from the pressure. I'm afraid of hope, she whispered. And I'm afraid of seeing the light in Lila's eyes go out, knowing we didn't try everything. A long silence fell like a thin wire suspended between two cliffs. Okay, she said. But if anything happens, I'll be the one to bear it. Elliot nodded. It was an agreement. It was a vow. That afternoon, Monica held her daughter close, reading a fairy tale as always, but this time her hands trembled slightly. Fairy tales always ended happily, but reality didn't follow such rules. Daddy's going away for a few days, Elliot said gently, leaning down to touch Lila's forehead. Where to? Lyla opened her eyes, her voice raspy. To meet doctors in Tokyo. To ask for a miracle for you. A miracle like in fairy tales. Yes, but in stories, magic comes from a wand. In real life, it comes from people who don't give up. Lyla smiled faintly, then drifted back to sleep. Sakataruryuajanom. That night, Monica didn't sleep. She sat by the hospital window watching the thick rain blanket the city. The lights from the tall buildings reflected in her eyes like flickering candles. Maybe Elliot was the only person in her life who never made promises, and yet always returned. Maybe, just maybe, this time she wasn't alone. And among the medical files, cost breakdowns, international legal protocols, and dozens of calls, there was still one thing no one had written down. Faith. Faith that on some days miracles don't come from the heavens, but from the brave decisions of two people once broken, now rising for the life of a child, reaching for each other through pain and choosing to chase a fragile chance. Because love had finally taken root. Tokyo greeted Elliot with a kind of cold unlike Seattle. Not the chill of rain, but the cold of technology, of a pace so relentless that every second became a commodity. This was a city that never slept, never waited, and never forgave those who lacked resolve. And yet amidst the bustling crowds at Haneda Airport, Elliot stood still for a long moment after stepping through immigration. He didn't go straight to the five-star hotel his assistant had booked. He didn't call the private driver. He simply pulled out his phone and reread a message from Monica. If the doctor says there's a 1% chance, I'll still say yes. Not because I have hope, but because I can't live without trying. What about you? No greeting, no question mark. But it was the biggest question of Elliot Hayes' life. A man for Wakich serum. The Umeda Medical Center, nestled in the heart of Shinjuku, was a 30-story building wrapped in sleek reflective glass. As Elliot stood at the revolving door, he caught a glimpse of himself, small and alone, etched faintly on its surface. Behind the reception desk, a Japanese nurse bowed deeply when he presented the introduction letter from Mercer Grace Hospital. And then everything moved fast like a gust of wind. The medical board, translators, clinical presentations in English intertwined with dense Japanese medical terminology. Elliot sat among the specialists, a complete outsider. And yet he had never focused so hard in his life. Lila's case is rare, one of the lead physicians said. She qualifies biologically, but her condition is very fragile. If we proceed, the stem cell treatment must be combined with hyperbaric oxygen therapy post-transplant. It's a protocol that's never been tested on children under 6. The research leader bowed his head, then continued in careful English. And we need your signature, not just as a sponsor, but as the legal guardian for an experimental transplant. A father's signature. Elliot looked at the paper. The ink was cold. The weight of responsibility impossible to measure. No mother present. She cannot remain in Japan long enough for recovery protocol. He nodded slightly, asked no more, and then picked up the pen. During a one. That night in a small hotel near the hospital, Elliot didn't sleep. He opened his laptop, but not to check project dashboards, not to track stocks, not to scroll through boardroom emails. He opened a blank Word document, and he began to write, Dear Monica, if you're reading this, it means you're in Seattle and I'm still in Tokyo. Maybe I've just signed something reckless. Maybe you're angry. Maybe Lyla is asleep, still holding that little towel with the embroidered white bunny, the first gift I ever dared to give a child that wasn't mine. But I'm not writing to explain. I'm writing to confess. I once believed I controlled the world. And then you came in, not loudly, not demanding, and showed me there are things that cannot be controlled by money logic or reputation. Only by one thing, love. I don't know how this will end. But I know this, if I had to choose again, I'd still put my name on that paper. Not out of duty, but because my heart has chosen you, and chosen Lyla, from the very moment she called me daddy. He didn't send the email. He printed it, folded it into quarters, and slipped it into the inner pocket of his suit. Tomorrow, when he returned to the hospital, he would carry with him the two most important things in his life, a signature on a legal document, and an unopened letter bound for the Western Hemisphere, where a brown-skinned woman with curly hair was still fighting quietly for her daughter's life. Monica didn't sleep that night. She sat beside Lila's bed, listening to the steady beeps of the heart monitor. Each tone was a reminder that time does not wait. On the nightstand, her phone lit up with an international call. She hesitated, then answered. Lyla will get the transplant. Elliot's voice rang through clear and certain. I've made the choice. I can't predict the outcome, but I believe. Because if I don't try, I won't be able to look that child in the eye ever again. You don't have to carry this alone, Monica whispered. I'm not doing it alone, he replied. I'm doing it because my heart has finally learned how to feel instead of fear. There was a long silence, and then Monica murmured, Then we'll carry it together. She said no more. But her voice had changed as if for the first time since her daughter was born, Monica wasn't holding everything up by herself. Because for the first time, she wasn't alone. And somewhere far across the ocean, a man was learning how to love not with logic, but with the unshakable choice of the heart. Seattle that autumn. Maple leaves fell like gentle fragments of memory quietly covering the wooden porch of the old St. Agnes Church, perched on Queen Anne Hill. There was no band, no extravagant dress, no red carpet, no celebrity guests. Just a bride in a long-sleeved white gown, sewn from satin borrowed from her mother's wedding dress, and a groom simple in a gray suit but with eyes that carried something he had never truly known in all his 33 years' peace. Elliot held Monica's hand as if it were the only doorway back to reality, a place where numbers, graphs, and reports faded into silence. All that remained was this woman standing before him, radiant in the sunset light streaming through the stained glass window. The old pastor who had witnessed hundreds of wedding vows spoke the blessing with a voice both warm and profoundly sincere. There is nothing more noble than love chosen in the midst of loss. No promise stronger than one born of pain and courage. Svartenindon. 3 months after the transplant in Tokyo, Lyla was strong enough to stand on her own tiny feet. Doctors said she was one of the first 10 children in the world to successfully respond to a regenerative heart muscle procedure using integrated stem cells and hyperbaric oxygen. But for Monica, the true miracle wasn't in the science, it was something deeper. Her daughter's heart had been revived by two people who had once been nothing to each other, but chose to stay for a reason greater than themselves. On the wedding day, Lyla was the flower girl. Her lilac dress embroidered with lace flowers was the first gift Elliot had ever personally commissioned for her, along with a note. You are the most beautiful part of your parents' new life. Monica remembered that moment when Lyla burst into the room and wrapped her arms around her. Mommy, you look like a princess, but Daddy is the magic. She laughed, her voice trembling slightly. You sure you're not imagining things? Nope. I dreamed about Daddy when I was still in your tummy. That made Elliot freeze for a long moment. He had never believed in things beyond logic. But standing there in that chapel, filled with golden light and echoing bells, Elliot understood something that no equation could ever explain. Love doesn't have to come at the right time. It only has to come from the right person. There were only 13 guests at the wedding. Monica's family, a few fellow nurses, her college best friend, and the two business associates Elliot had kept in touch with after walking away from his CEO title. They didn't come to witness a wedding. They came to witness a resurrection, a rebirth from loss, from loneliness, from doubt, from the nameless wounds we all carry through life. Monica didn't cry during the ceremony, but when Elliot leaned in and whispered, You know, this isn't a promise, she looked up, eyes wide. He continued, his voice low and steady, like the first heartbeat she had heard the day Lyla was born. Because I won't promise, I'll act. She took his hand, a hand that had once trembled from hurt, once withdrawn out of fear, now warm and steady as stone. And then within the quiet church beneath white petals, falling like snow, with a little girl clasping the train of her mother's dress, they kissed. Not the kind of kiss seen in movies, but the kind exchanged by two people who had walked through valleys, through silence, through time, and found each other not by fate but by choice. Hey, that evening after the small backyard gathering, Monica sat with Elliot on the balcony. Seattle sparkled with 1,000 city lights, while in her hand a glass of red wine shimmered with starlight. Do you regret it, she asked softly. Regret what, he teased, raising an eyebrow. The modest wedding. All of it. Leaving your company, staying. Me. Elliot didn't answer right away. He pulled a blanket gently around her shoulders and spoke slowly. I've lived in penthouses worth tens of millions, but nowhere ever made me feel alive. Until you texted me, if there's a 1% chance, I'll still choose it. She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. Will we be okay? I won't promise, but we'll choose each other. Every day. A such dear one. Somewhere else in the city, skyscrapers still gleamed. Projects still launched. Contracts still signed. And the wealthy continued mapping out the future. But in a small wooden house on the hillside of Queen Anne, Three hearts beat to the rhythm of an unnamed melody, a song written not by fate, but by the choice of those who once lost everything, and somehow found one another. It was a foggy winter morning in Seattle. Monica sat in the kitchen slowly stirring a cup of hot cocoa for Lyla. Everything felt normal. The radio played Elliot's favorite jazz station. The scent of toasted bread drifted warmly through the air, and Lila's laughter rang out like a sweet harmony. Until there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent. Just three soft taps like a whisper on memory. Monica opened the door. In front of her stood a man tall, light brown skin, closely cropped hair, and haunting ash-gray eyes. Even after nearly 10 years, she couldn't not recognize him. Brandon Miller, Lila's biological father? Narawaniyam. Brandon had always been the name Monica never spoke. A mistake from a reckless youth. A brief, uneven fling that ended long before it even began. When Monica told him she was pregnant, Brandon vanished as if he'd never existed. No letter, no apology, not a word of explanation. Until today, I heard from an old friend, his voice was hoarse, about the transplant, about the little girl. Monica stood still. She couldn't tell if she was angry, scared, or simply confused why after everything he would show up now. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice steadier than the storm in her chest. "To say I'm sorry," Brandon replied, "and to know if she's still alive." The words rough, simple, landed in her heart like a dull blade. Shaktir. Elliot walked in just as Monica was trying to hold herself upright in the whirlwind of the past. He didn't say anything when he saw a stranger in the house, but his eyes, usually calm, darkened instantly. Brandon stood up and extended a hand. Elliot didn't take it. "Who are you?" Brandon asked, though it seemed he already knew. "I'm the man who stood by Lyla when she was on the edge of life," Elliot said. "The man who signed the consent forms to save her life on your behalf." A heavy pause filled the room. Brandon withdrew his hand, exhaling. "Then, what am I to her now?" Monica didn't answer. She couldn't. To her, Brandon was the past, unfinished, painful, and not worth reopening. But Lyla was a blank page. And a blank page sometimes needs the truth to fill it, not silence painted over with pretty lies. Monica didn't speak to Elliot for the rest of that evening. She simply tucked Lyla into bed, then sat on the porch with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Elliot stepped out and gently draped a coat over her shoulders. "Are you angry?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Not angry, just afraid." Afraid of what? Afraid Lyla will look at Brandon as someone she never had the chance to love, and I don't know what to do with that. Elliot was quiet for a long time. "I'm afraid too," he whispered. "Afraid that I love her so much. I forget I don't have the right to decide what her heart wants." Monica turned toward him, her gaze heavy and raw. "You don't need a right, Elliot. You're her father, not because the law says so, but because you were there. When I couldn't stand anymore. When Lila's heart was giving out. And when no one else chose to stay." Simo. A week later, Brandon sent a letter requesting to meet Lyla. It wasn't a movie-worthy reunion, just a short conversation under Monica's supervision, like two strangers trying to touch a truth too fragile to hold. Lyla looked at the man before her with curiosity, not fear. She had always had sharp intuition, and in Brandon's eyes there was something that didn't make her retreat. "Do you know who I am?" Brandon asked. "You're the one who makes Mommy Monica worried," she replied bluntly, her voice clear as glass. Brandon laughed, then quietly began to cry. "I'm sorry. I don't know you, but I forgive you," Lyla said, "because my mommy taught me this. Some people come back not to reclaim anything, but just to say something they should have said long ago." Elliot stood in the hallway hearing every word. His heart ached not with jealousy, but with the understanding that love is not possession, but the kind of maturity that can let go if needed. But Monica came to him and took his hand. "I didn't choose Brandon," she said softly. "I chose the one who chose me even when I had nothing left to give." Elliot bowed his head, his hand tightening around hers. "Nice runner." That night, Lyla wrote a letter. "Dear Mr. Brandon, thank you for coming. I don't know if you'll stay or go, but I already have a dad. Daddy Elliot may not share my blood type, but his heart beats in rhythm with mine every day. I hope you find a place to begin again, just like my mom and dad did. And if you really love me, then please love me like someone who can stand outside of happiness without needing to break it." The letter was never sent. But Brandon left Seattle the next morning, leaving behind only one message. "Thank you for letting me know she's alive and loved," was his son. Darkness never disappears, But when people are brave enough to face it, it becomes only the backdrop, the canvas that makes the light easier to see. Elliot, Monica, and Lyla, three people, three scars, were no longer afraid of the dark because they had each other. And from that moment on, each day they lived was their quiet way of telling the world. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by choice. 3 months after Brandon left Seattle in silence, Monica thought the door to the past had finally closed for good. But on a March morning, when the surface of Lake Union still shimmered with melting ice, Monica received a thick parcel. Inside were legal documents. Brandon Miller, plaintiff, had filed a petition for paternity recognition and official visitation rights to Lyla Carter. She nearly dropped the teacup in her hand. Her heart, wrapped in fragile peace, now felt suffocated by an old fear, not in the form of an apology but under the name of the law. Elliot said nothing when Monica told him. He asked just one thing: "Do you want me to stand with you?" Her answer was a nod. No explanations, no justifications. Because sometimes at the deepest edge of pain, people don't need someone to say the right thing. They just need someone who chooses to stay. On the day of the hearing, the Seattle sky was gray, as if mirroring the storm inside those three hearts. Brandon wore a slate blue suit. His face no longer carried the scruff of his youth. In his hand was a thick folder birth certificate, DNA test, and a record of correspondence. Everything was legal, valid. But in court, what's valid isn't always enough to win the heart of a child. Monica's lawyer spoke concisely. Lyla had been raised by her biological mother since birth, with no presence from the biological father at any stage. Currently, she lived in a stable home with Monica and Elliot Carter, who had acted as a father both emotionally and legally for the past 2 years. Mr. Brandon may have biological rights, the lawyer said, calm, yet resolute, but that does not equal the right to her heart. Brandon's side argued that he was now ready for fatherhood, had a stable job, and wanted to make up for lost time. He wasn't seeking custody, only legal visitation and contact. The judge, a silver-haired woman with eyes seasoned by experience, requested to meet Lyla alone without her parents present. The private meeting lasted nearly an hour. As Monica watched her daughter walk out of that room, she silently worried, can a child truly understand the tangled emotions of grown-ups? Elliot sat beside her silent, his eyes never leaving Lyla. A week later, the court resumed for Monica's testimony. She stood tall, voice low but unwavering. "Brandon is my child's biological father," she began. "I don't deny that. But Lyla is a little girl who once stood at the edge of life and death. And the one who was there when she was unconscious, when I was falling apart, when we needed a heart big enough to sacrifice, was Elliot." She turned to look at the man sitting below. "He shares no blood with her, but he shared the sleepless nights, the ICU visits, and the questions like, 'Mommy, am I going to die?' Questions I couldn't bear to answer. That kind of love, if not recognized by the law, should at least be acknowledged by a child's heart." Her voice broke, but her gaze was clear. The judge returned to her bench, flipping through files before looking up. In paternity hearings, the law considers two things: biology and the best interests of the child. She paused, then turned to Brandon. "You've been absent for nearly 10 years. Whatever the reason, you cannot deny the fact that in the most crucial years, this child did not have you. But you came back, and that means you can still be some part of her life." Then she turned to Monica and Elliot. "But a part does not mean the whole. Elliot Carter, based on records and testimony, has been a responsible figure, helping to raise Lyla as a true father. Most importantly, the child's own words speak volumes." The courtroom fell silent. The judge read from Lyla's statement. "I don't know much about Mr. Brandon. I just remember he smells like ocean wind. But Daddy Elliot smells like books, toasted bread, and warm hands. I don't need another dad, but if there's a man who won't make mommy cry, then I'm okay with that." The room stayed still. The final ruling: Brandon would be allowed one supervised visitation per month with no changes to the current custody arrangement. Elliot would retain his legal parental status with full rights regarding Lyla's medical, educational, and welfare decisions. Brandon left the courtroom without protest, without pleading. He looked at Elliot not with hostility, but with a silent form of acceptance. Elliot walked over and extended a hand. "Thank you for not hurting her." Brandon shook it. "Thank you for loving her, like she was your own." That night, Lyla climbed into Elliot's bed, hugging a pillow. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you sad today?" Elliot pulled her gently into his arms. "No, sweetheart, I just feel lucky, because I was chosen, not by the law, but by you." She smiled, cheek pressed to his chest. "Then tomorrow can you make pancakes, but more strawberries than last time?" An order from the princess daddy wouldn't dare disobey. They laughed. A soft laugh, but one that echoed through the whole house. Outside the window, Seattle's lights shimmered across the lake like a scattered galaxy. And in each heart they knew. This wasn't a battle to win, but a journey to protect something far more precious, the peace in a child's heart. On a gray morning in early April, the sky over Seattle wore a shade of lead. A fine mist of rain fell like a thin curtain, turning even traffic lights into quiet, mournful glows. In the kitchen filled with the scent of vanilla and baked pastries, Monica washed dishes in silence while Elliot was tying Lila's shoelaces. The little girl wore a pale blue dress, her hair braided into twin plaits, her face visibly tired despite a brave smile. "Daddy Elliot, are we leaving yet?" she whispered softly. Elliot picked her up, hugging her close. "Today is the day of courage, princess." Lyla nodded, but in those wide brown eyes, fear was growing silent and shadowy like darkness climbing from the bottom of a well. At Seattle Children's Medical Center, everything had been prepared in advance. It was a rare and complex open-heart surgery expected to last over 6 hours. Though the doctors were highly skilled, there was still a 10% risk of complications, and that small percentage clutched Monica's heart like a cold hand. She sat beside Lyla as the nurse administered anesthesia. Her daughter's small hand reached for hers, then gradually loosened like a falling petal as the medicine took hold. Before her eyelids closed, Lyla smiled. "Don't cry, Mommy, I'll come back. For pancakes." Monica swallowed her tears, clutching that tiny hand, as if holding on to a single trembling thread of hope. The operating room door closed. In the waiting area, time was no longer measured in minutes, but in heartbeats drawn tight. Monica couldn't sit still. Elliot sat beside her, eyes locked on the electronic monitor, displaying surgery status. Brandon arrived too, though no one had called him. He sat quietly in a distant corner, not intruding occasionally, glancing up at Monica, with a gaze full of unspoken remorse. He had the right to remain silent, but instead he said, "If I could trade places with her, I would." Even though the words came late, they sliced open old wounds. Monica didn't reply, but she didn't walk away either, and sometimes silence is its own form of forgiveness. Elliot walked over and handed Brandon a cup of hot coffee. "Today, no matter what, the three of us are all fathers." The room fell silent, a quiet kind of agreement. There was no argument over who was right, only a shared terror losing Lyla. 4 hours. 5. 6. When the lead surgeon, Dr. Green, finally stepped out, Monica rushed to him like an arrow loosed from a bow, but his eyes softened with a faint smile. The operation was successful. "She'll need close monitoring for the next 48 hours, but your daughter is a real little warrior." Monica collapsed into Elliot's arms, sobbing. Brandon turned away, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. The ICU room was bathed in soft white light. On the bed, Lyla lay small and fragile, surrounded by tubes and monitors. Monica sat beside her, holding her daughter's hand, humming a gentle lullaby, the same one she used to sing at bedtime. Now it was a melody to call her back from the edge. Elliot stood on the other side, his hand resting on the blanket, eyes full of peace, as if each breath from Lyla carried his silent prayers. Brandon didn't step inside. He remained at the glass window, palm pressed against it in quiet apology for the years he'd been gone, and for the truth that he was no longer the one she reached for first. That night, Monica fell asleep on the bench, her head resting on Elliot's lap. The light was dim, the room hushed, filled only with the sound of the ventilator and rain outside. Elliot stroked her hair, his eyes distant. He thought of everything they'd been through, from a stranger standing in the December rain to the man now sitting at the edge of a family who chose him. Not out of duty, but out of love. As Monica stirred in her sleep, she murmured, "If she doesn't wake up, I don't know if I'll be able to breathe." Elliot gripped her hand tightly. "If anything happens, I'll breathe for you and live for her until she comes back." His words fell like a sacred hymn in the dark, enough to make Monica smile faintly, a smile hidden in her tears. The next morning, as the first ray of sunlight pierced through the window, Lyla stirred. Her heavy eyelids fluttered, lips parting. "Mom, where's the pancake?" Monica shot up, barely believing it. The little girl smiled weakly. "I'm hungry. Super hungry." Elliot pulled Monica into his arms, and their tears blended together. Lyla didn't know she had just crossed the line between life and death. But in her tiny heart, she knew this. She was deeply, completely loved. A few days later, Brandon left Seattle. Before he went, he left a letter not addressed to anyone specific, just placed on the table beside the family photo. "I didn't win, but I didn't lose either. Because Lyla lived, and she now has people I can never replace. I will return not to demand but to become worthy. When Lyla needs a friend for the road ahead, I'll be there, even if only as a silent shadow. Brandon. Monica folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. A drawer not for bitterness, but for those who once failed and chose to return with all their heart. Seattle nights had a beauty all their own, not dazzling, not noisy. Just the quiet shimmer of streetlights stretching like a necklace across the still waters of Lake Washington. On the 19th floor of a refurbished family apartment building, the nightlight in Lila's room still glowed faintly. Monica sat at the edge of the bed, gently rubbing warm oil into her daughter's tiny trembling feet. The surgical scars hadn't fully healed, but Lyla no longer looked as pale as she had the week before. She had started smiling again, started drawing, started asking questions that made Elliot either laugh or freeze like any real dad. "Where's Daddy Elliot?" Lyla asked softly, her eyelids growing heavier. Monica smiled. "He went out to get your night milk. He says milk helps grow your superpowers." "I want superpowers, so I can help Mommy sleep better." Monica's heart melted. She leaned in and kissed her daughter's forehead. "As long as you're here, I already have a miracle." When Monica returned to the living room, Elliot was on the sofa with a steaming mug of warm milk and a small wooden box. She recognized it instantly. It was her mother's music box, the one Monica had lost in a storm when Lyla was barely walking. No one had ever found it, and yet there it was again, whole and gentle, like a piece of the past restored. "You told me about it once. Remember the box that played the lullaby your mom used to sing every night?" "I found this one through an antique seller. It's not exactly the same, but the melody is pretty close." Elliot placed the box in her hands and turned the key. The melody spilled out like a quiet brook in some forgotten forest inside Monica's memory. She was silent for a long moment. "You don't know how much I needed this," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Elliot didn't reply. He simply wrapped his arms around her from behind. They sat there saying nothing, needing no light, no words. Only the music played, echoing softly through the apartment and into the cracks that once separated them. Late into the night, Monica was stirred awake, not by a nightmare, but by laughter. She walked quietly into Lila's room and witnessed a nearly surreal sight. Lyla was propped up against her pillow, wearing a paper crown surrounded by stuffed animals' dolls, and Elliot in full galaxy print pajamas, voicing every character in her Princess Tea Party. "Princess Lyla, today is your Majesty's coronation," Elliot announced in a ridiculous tone that nearly made Monica laugh out loud. Lyla clapped, giggling. "Father, bring me the royal pudding." Elliot bowed gravely. "Alas, your highness, the royal kitchen is asleep, but your father can tell you a tale if you would grant him the honor." Monica stood in the hallway, hand covering her mouth, her heartbeat in a rhythm both familiar and foreign. She had never seen Elliot like this, clumsy tender, pouring his whole self into a child who didn't share his blood, but who clearly shared his heartbeat. When Lyla eventually dozed off, Elliot gently tucked her in and tiptoed out. Monica was waiting. "I never imagined you could become a father like that," she said quietly. Elliot gave a small shrug as if it wasn't worth mentioning. "I never imagined I could love a child so much that I get scared to breathe if she sleeps too long." They looked at each other in the dark, a space where the final distance between their hearts seemed to dissolve. No longer two wounded adults, but two souls drawing closer in the simplest, truest way to be needed, to be chosen, to stay. That night when Monica returned to the bedroom, she saw a notebook on the nightstand. On the first page was handwriting she didn't recognize. "Dad Notes" by Elliot Warren. Note number 1, doesn't matter if she shares my DNA. If she hurts, my heart hurts. Note number 2, learn how to braid hair. Urgent. Note number 3, ask Monica how to make banana pancakes. Lyla said mine were too thick. Note number 4, if allowed, ask her mom for permission to be her dad. Even just a little. Monica placed her hand over the notebook without turning the page. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from the quiet realization that she no longer had to face the dark alone. Outside, the Seattle night was still deep, but in that small apartment, in the heart of the city, a miracle had happened. Not the kind born from medicine or doctors, but the kind born from people who dared to love through fear. A miracle not made by prayer, but by choosing trust in the smallest details: a paper crown, a warm cup of milk, a half-filled notebook. That night, Monica cradled Lyla as she slept. Elliot sat in the living room, pen in hand, writing note number 5. Note number 5, I never used to dream of having a family. But if I ever dared to dream, this would be the most beautiful one. Dawn in Seattle unfurled like silk mist brushing past the trees lining Lake Union. At Boston Harbor Children's Medical Center, where Lyla's surgery had once been deemed a miracle in need of a miracle, the first light of morning was also the moment a new heart began to beat in her tiny chest. The surgery had succeeded. A donor heart from a child in Minnesota had been a perfect match. It was flown in overnight and placed with painstaking care into Lyla's body by Dr. Sandoval, the same surgeon who once dismissed hope as wishful thinking, now anchoring every stitch with all the skill and faith he had. Monica collapsed onto the hallway floor when the nurse whispered, "We've closed the chest. She's stable. The heart, it's beating well." And Elliot, he didn't say a word. His hands clenched white as bone before he turned away, walking out to the balcony on the 7th floor, where the sun had just crept over the skyline. He tilted his head to the sky, no tears, no words, only folded hands. Not a prayer, a promise. Darat sari yuri to Marie dear. A week later, Lyla woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, dim but clear, as if seeing the world for the very first time. Monica wept, holding her daughter close, and Elliot for the first time sat beside the bed and held her hand without hesitation. "Daddy's here," he whispered. Lyla said nothing at first. Then she reached up and touched the old wooden pendant around his neck, the one she'd always been curious about. "Don't cry, Daddy," she whispered, as if her new heart knew just how many tears he had already shed. "Anawin, Timam." The days that followed were fragile but beautiful. Every morning, Monica sat with Lyla. Elliot learned how to change her dressings, record blood pressure chart, every spike of pain. Despite being a billionaire, he carried urine bags from the suction machine without a second thought. And when a nurse asked, "Are you her biological father or foster father?" Monica smiled and said simply, "He's her dad." That's all. No one questioned it. Suriyuri. A month later, Monica received a letter from the attorney representing the mother of the donor child. "We know our daughter is gone, but her heart lives on. If possible, we'd like to meet the little girl. Not to ask for anything, only to hear how our child's heart is still beating." Monica's hands trembled as she read it. Elliot took the letter, read it again, then looked at her. "What do you think?" he asked. "I'm not sure," Monica said quietly. "Lila's just beginning to recover." "I understand," Elliot said. "But if it were us, wouldn't we want to hear our child's heart again, just once?" They didn't discuss it further. That evening, Monica sent a reply, "We would be honored." Nessa Surtur. The meeting took place in a small park next to the hospital. It was the first time Monica saw a particular kind of light in someone's eyes. Kelly, the woman who had lost her daughter Nora in a spring festival car accident, did not cry when she saw Lyla. She simply held Monica's hands and whispered Nora's heart found the right home. Monica couldn't hold back her tears. And Lyla, who didn't fully understand, hugged the woman gently and said, "You smell like sunshine." Sakinoam. That night, Elliot walked into the bedroom. Monica was reading to Lyla from a storybook. He stopped at the door and exhaled, as if in that quiet moment, all the missing pieces had finally fallen into place. He handed Monica a small box. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something I kept from the first day I stepped into that hospital room." Inside were three things: a photo of the nameplate that had once read Monica Taylor, Room 102, Lila's first hospital wristband, and the handkerchief Monica had dropped back when she was just a desperate woman, begging a stranger to be her daughter's dad for one day. "You kept it." "I thought it would just be one day," Elliot said softly. "But from the second day on, I couldn't walk away." Monica looked at him. Her eyes held no more questions, only the answer. They were no longer two people lost at sea, but two survivors, not just of the storm, but of the choice to keep walking forward together with a new heart, both literally and metaphorically. Sabri Yiddish, Hitanamum. Later that night, Monica fell asleep holding Lyla. Elliot stood quietly at the bedroom door. Moonlight poured across the room, catching on a blank invitation card he hadn't yet written. On the table beside a stack of medical papers lay a single sheet of paper. On it, scribbled in Elliot's handwriting, was one line: "A new heart for a new journey. Monica, will you let me walk this life with you?" And so when the next morning arrived, it wasn't just Lila's new heart that beat stronger, but two grown-up hearts finally finding their rhythm in a place called home. It was an early summer evening in Seattle. The sky shimmered with thousands of stars, as if each one carried a memory, soft, glowing, and alive. In the backyard of their new home, a wooden cottage nestled atop West Queen Anne Hill, Monica spread a hand-woven rug over the grass. Lyla curled up in her lap, wrapped in an oversized beige sweater, her soft curls tied in pigtails, her eyes sparkling with quiet anticipation. Across the yard, Elliot was busy lighting a campfire. He still hadn't fully adjusted to a life without formula stock charts or meetings filtered through 3 layers of assistance. Yet strangely enough, here where the only sound was the whisper of insects and the quiet pulse of peace, he felt more himself than ever. "Hurry, Dad," Lyla giggled. "I saw a shooting star." Elliot turned just in time to catch the streak of light cutting across the night sky, a silver tear tracing a wish not yet spoken. He walked over, sat beside them, and pulled them both into his arms. "Let's make a wish together," he suggested. Monica nodded gently. They closed their eyes, fingers, laced cheeks touching silent, as if time itself had paused to listen. When they opened their eyes again, Lyla whispered, "What did you wish for, Daddy?" Elliot smiled. "I wished that what I have right now never fades." 1 week later was Lila's first day at Whitaker Elementary School, a small suburban school where every teacher knew every child's name. That morning, Monica dressed her in a pale pink floral dress, the same one she had kept hoping one day her daughter would be well enough to wear it. Elliot personally tied the ribbon around her collar a little crooked and slipped a caramel snack into her backpack, their secret weapon. At the school gate, Lyla turned around and shaped a heart with her hands. "Don't cry, Mommy and Daddy. I'm not going to the hospital today. I'm going to school." Neither Monica nor Elliot could speak. They just stood there, hand in hand, watching the little girl who had clawed her way back to life step through the gate of her future with the steady steps of early autumn light. Satin never year one. Time passed, a year went by. Elliot, once a billionaire afraid of touch, afraid of love, could now flip pancakes on Sundays, read children's books without dramatic voices, and refer to his wife as home in every text. Monica, once a single mother with a heart full of scars, was now the best-selling author of One Day a Father, a lifetime of family on every ebook platform. And Lyla, the girl who once dreamed of being a falling star, was now a second grader with a best friend named Zoe, a jump rope obsession, and the heart of an angel beating stronger with every day. Sonwinner, Swineyun. That night, the three of them sat together in the living room. Monica leaned her head on Elliot's shoulder. Lyla lay sprawled across them, both fast asleep to the gentle hum of jazz in the background. "Do you believe in destiny?" Monica asked softly. "I do," Elliot replied. "But I don't think destiny is just what happens to us. It's what we choose when we love someone, when we don't leave, and when we dare to begin again." She didn't respond in words, just squeezed his hand tighter. On the wall hung a black and white photo, the three of them beneath a blooming cherry blossom tree. Etched beneath the frame were the words, "We don't choose where we begin, but we can choose who walks with us to the end." If you've walked with Monica, Elliot, and Lyla through this journey, through the stopped heartbeats, the abandoned dreams, and the stars of tomorrow, then perhaps you felt it too. That love doesn't come from grand promises. It comes from the quiet moments we choose to stay again and again, without condition, without question, without letting go. Thank you for being part of this story. If it made you smile, cry, or simply remember someone you love, leave a little trace behind. Like a comment or a share might just be the spark that helps someone else find light in their sky. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because together we'll keep writing the stories of tomorrow, where every broken heart can still be the start of a miracle. This may be the end, but it's also a beginning. Somewhere out there, a star is still falling, and someone is still waiting for a wish to come true.